Om Tavakathamaratam Taptajivanam Kavivedikam Kalashapaham Sharapanangalam Srimadadakam Kuvigananti Hurirajana. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to squirt souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome, everyone, to our class from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We are on page 249. This is the chapter with the devotees at Dakshineshwar, part 1, and it is Sunday, starting a new day. Sunday, June 17th, 1883. Sri Ramakrishna was resting in his room in the temple garden at Dakshineshwar. It was afternoon. Adhar and M arrived and saluted the master. A tantric devotee also came in. Rakal, Hazra, and Ramlal were staying with the master. Okay, so Adhar, we met. He just started recently coming. And he very quickly became a very, very close devotee of Sri Ramakrishna. And this tantric devotee, I don't think we ever find out who he is. We don't get his name, but this happens sometimes. It's okay. And Rakal, this was a bit of a drama going on that would he stay at home? He was recently married with a child. Would he stay with Sri Ramakrishna? His father had some objections, this and that. But at this particular time, he was staying with Sri Ramakrishna. Hazrat, of course, stayed at the temple, and Ramlal also. Master to the devotees. Yeah, you'll remember this whole thing is about the householders, huh? Can they realize God? Why shouldn't one be able to attain spirituality living the life of a householder? But it is extremely difficult. Now, what does he mean extremely difficult? Does it mean it's extremely difficult for them to attain devotion? No. It's not that it's difficult for them, but there are difficulties for them. There are certain obstacles and things, but it's not like inherently they're incapable of it. It's not a question of the householder. It's a question of what's entailed in the householder's life, their duties and obligations and entanglements and things like that. So it is extremely difficult. So don't get this idea that the householders can't do it, but they have to rearrange their lives a little bit so that they have the time and they have the priorities and everything. And then otherwise, Thakur says there are advantages to the householder life. Sages like Janaka entered the world after attaining knowledge, but still, the world is a place of terror. Even a detached householder has to be careful. Now, what is the terror in the world that he's talking about? Ups and downs in life, attachment, bereavements. Family just came, the father just died a couple of days ago. Of course, that can happen to anyone, but whenever one enters into the world, that means that there will be some entanglements, there'll be some disappointments, there'll be ups and downs and everything. Otherwise, a place of terror is not a place of terror, but we have to be very cautious. Even a detached householder has to be careful. Once Janaka bent down his head at the sight of a Bhairavi. He shrank from seeing a woman. The Bhairavi said to him, Janaka, I see that you have not yet attained knowledge. You still differentiate between man and woman. If you move about in a room filled with soot, you will soil your body, however slightly, no matter how clever you may be. So this is what he's saying, that the sannyasi has the advantage of living in a room that's cleaned out. That means that these temptations and entanglements and obstacles aren't there. The householder has to be very careful. As I say, not because of the householder, but because of the circumstances. So they have to mix with all types of people, family relations, so many different things that can be obstacles in keeping the mind calm and peaceful. So if you move about in a room filled with soot, you will soil your body, however slightly, no matter how clever you may be. I have seen householder devotees filled with spiritual emotion while performing their daily worship, wearing their silk clothes. They maintain that attitude even until they take their refreshment after the worship. But afterwards they become their old selves again. They display their rajasic and tamasic natures. Sattva begets bhakti. Even bhakti has three aspects: sattva, rajas, and tamas. The sattva of bhakti is pure sattva. When a devotee acquires it, he doesn't direct his mind to anything but God. He pays only as much attention to his body as is absolutely necessary for its protection. Yeah, we read in Gita that from sattva arises knowledge and goodness and compassion. And Thakur is saying in bhakti, that means that if we have a sattvic nature, if we're very pure, and there's sattva has so many different aspects to it. One of the most important elements of sattva is this kindness. Uh, It's kindness and goodness. Just to be kind, good, simple people. Sattva also means very, very simple, not ostentatious or anything like that. So if we have that, then it also begets knowledge, jnana, bhakti, everything. This is why we're trying to develop sattva. We read so often that we have to transcend sattva, but we have to get it first. Yeah, we should never think that I'm too kind and compassionate and good in everything. This will be a great bondage for me. We have to develop these things first, and once we develop them, then this is the final rung. Then we can worry about do I have that ego that I'm a good person, a kind person, compassionate person. Otherwise, this sattva is what counteracts the tendencies towards uh, lust and greed and anger and hatred and pride and envy, all of the other things that are born of tamas and rajas. So the sattva of bhakti is pure sattva. We have another concept here. We go from tamas to rajas to sattva to shuddha sattva. The Thakur uses this, and we find this. The Shuddha Sattva is that sattva that has no binding power. So we no binding power. So we don't have to worry about any. So if we think again, the stairs going to the roof, we'll have the three of tamas, then the three of rajas, then uh, sattva a little bit mixed with rajas, and then sattva, and then this pure sattva. That'll be just before we get to the roof. So that is no binding power to it. When a devotee acquires it, he doesn't direct his mind to anything but God. He pays only as much attention to his body as is absolutely necessary for its protection. Yeah, Thakur in different places, he gives these different characteristics of the devotees according to the gunas. They're all good. They're all good people. And but this devotion will manifest differently according to how much rajas and sattva and tamas that we have. So the sattvic person may even be a little bit messy. They don't care so much to keep everything polished and neat and clean and everything. Uh, we think that may be tamas, but with the devotee it is sattva. But they're very simple, and nobody knows that they do everything in secret. Nobody knows that they're spending long hours in meditation, and their puja is very simple. There's no uh, outer display of anything. So this is sattva. For some reason, and rajas, then a lot of pomp and wearing a silk cloth and rudraksha beads with gold and silver and everything. But somehow Thakur likes this tamasic bhakti that says you have to reveal yourself to me, or I'll cut my throat with a knife if you don't, because he practiced that. So this is the tamasa bhakti. He said this is a good thing. This is tamasa bhakti. But a Paramahamsa is beyond the three gunas. Though they exist in him, yet they are practically non-existent. Exist in him, that means because even the Paramahamsa has a human body and a human mind. So even the avatar, that Thakur mentioned that so many times, even the avatar will have some human emotions and things like that, but no attachment to them. He feels they belong to the body and the mind, not to me. Like a child, he is not under the control of any of the gunas. That is why Paramahamsas allow small children to come near them in order to assume their nature. Yeah, they often say, Panchama Varsya Balika, 5-year-old boy, seems to be the age of the Paramahamsa. Of course, Arya is 10 years old. We like to keep him around also. Paramahamsas may not lay things up. Now, Paramahamsa, Thakur uses this term not in a very technical sense. There is a class and a type of Paramahamsa Sampradaya. I don't know what it is specifically, but we'll remember one time there was a sadhu that Thakur liked very much. He met him, I think, outside of Ram's house when he was going between Ram's house and Surendra's house, and he said, bring him to Dakshineswar sometime. They brought him, he liked him very. So he asked, what Sampradaya do you belong to? He said, they called me the Paramahamsa. Yeah. But for Thakur Paramahamsa, it means first the highest type of sannyas, and those who don't care for even wearing Garawa cloth. They don't need any of these things, any of the signs or danda, any of these things. These Paramahamsa, they're beyond everything. And they're supposed to be like the swan. The swan can separate the curds from the whey in milk. They secrete a little bit of acid or something, and then they can just take the solid part and leave the liquid part behind. So they have the ability to discriminate between the real and the unreal. But they also have this mood of a child. So when Thakur talks about the three different types of God-realized souls, these will be the Paramahamsas. They'll be like a ghoul or like a child, like an inert thing. What's the fourth? Balakavat, Unmadavat, or like a mad person or a drunkard, even. Yeah. Paramahamsas may not lay things up, but this rule does not apply to householders. They must provide for their families. This was a very, very strict rule with Sri Ramakrishna, that he couldn't take anything and save it for the next day. He was very, very particular about that. There was one incident where somebody wanted to give something, not even for him, for Ramlal, and he couldn't take it. He said, "No, I can't take things and save them for the next day. Please forgive me." And everything. It was a very strict rule with him. If he broke that rule without knowing it, he was an odd person, this Ramakrishna. Sometimes these different rules about not taking anything that didn't belong to him. If he did it by accident, he would start reeling and going towards the Ganges as if he's going to drown himself. Then he would realize, oh, I took something to save it that I shouldn't do. Then he'd throw it away and he'd be okay again. So this was another strict rule because it means that he's not fully relying on the Divine Mother. He's thinking, oh, what if she doesn't provide tomorrow? I better keep something in secret for myself. And so it's everything with him was full and perfect reliance. Yeah, there's an expression, that only the monks and the birds don't save for the morrow, something like that. From Hindi or Urdu thing. Tantric devotee. Is a Paramahamsa aware of virtue and vice? Okay, highly philosophical question, but a little bit practical also. So Papa Punya, are they aware of it? And some people will even say, are they free from it? Because there's always this idea that the God-realized souls don't accrue any karma no matter what they do. And of course, it goes back to Gita that if even Arjuna, if he won't get any bad karma by killing people, if he does it without any sense of I, and he does it out of a sense of duty, then is there a state where the Paramahamsa can do anything, can do things which we would say ordinarily are evil things, huh? Sinful things, and not get any bad result from it? It's a very big question because we'll hear many these so-called gurus who will say these instructions are for you, not for me. I don't have to follow these things. I've reached that higher state, Paramahamsa state, like that. Now, Thakur says, well, in theory, it may be that they're free from all types of karma, but if they're really God-realized souls, it's impossible for them to do anything that can harm anybody else. Impossible. Just like the expert dancer will never miss a beat. Everything will be in perfect timing and everything. But does he even see the Paramahamsa? Does he even see that this is an evil person, this is a good person? What is their view of the world? Interesting question. Master. Keshav Sen also asked that question. Keshav, of course, was the leader of the Brahmo Samaj. I said to him, if I explain that to you, then you won't be able to keep your society together. Now, Keshav, he was a householder, and he was an organization man. He had a big society and everything, but he was a very, very good person. And he did a lot of good things, and Thakur loved him very much, and Thakur respected his spiritual stature. Not that he ever said that he was anything like the direct disciples, that he was a Nitya Siddha, nothing like that. In fact, he used to embarrass Narendra because he used to say, you see this Keshav is who worshipped throughout the world. He went to London and met Queen Victoria. He was world famous. That if he has one of these virtues, then Narendra has 18 such virtues. And then they would say, what are you talking about? I'm just a boy. How do you compare me to him? But Thakur knew it. So he loved Keshav. He had high respect for him, but he didn't consider him in the same class as some of the direct disciples, Swamiji, of course, and others. And he knew that he had this desire to keep the society going. And very sadly, because of this arranged marriage for his daughter, everything fell apart. There was a big split in the Brahmo Samaj. And then he died shortly after that. But Thakur loved him. And when he passed away, it was a great blow to Sri Ramakrishna. He used to say, okay, Keshav, if you go, with whom will I talk when I go to Calcutta? So they had a very sweet relationship. So Keshav Sen also asked that question. I said to him, if I explain that to you, then you won't be able to keep your society together. In that case, we'd better stop here, said Keshav. Do you know the significance of virtue and vice? Okay, Pagpunya, this we find throughout the Gita, all of these pairs of opposites, and we have to distinguish between the two. We have to know what is to be done and what is not to be done. So all of the statutes and teachings and everything in the Hindu tradition, and every tradition has to do with these what is recommended and what is prohibited. What is pratisiddha, the things that we're not allowed to do. So it's important for us to know that. Now, this Paramahamsa, he's in a different category. So Thakur says, do you know the significance of virtue and vice? Paramahamsa sees that it is God who gives us evil tendencies as well as good tendencies. Now, this I find to be such a fascinating subject, this idea of why do we do good things and bad things. We talked about it last time and so many other times with that Duryodhana, with that statement that I do as you make me do. Don't yell at me for doing any bad stuff. That is your fault. You dwell within my heart. Or people can say, oh, it's such a beautiful statement. that I feel that you're there inspiring me to do everything. Whatever I do because the divine inspiration is behind me. Now, the Thakur says very clearly that it's the God realized soul alone who can say that I do as mother makes me do. Now, sometimes he'll say that uh, we're responsible for our own actions. Sometimes he'll say that it's our karma. Sometimes he'll say that everything is the will of God. Of course, we know that. He'll say that very often. Now, what does that mean? Everything is the will of God. Sometimes he'll say, well, according to the will of God, we have the karma theory. Huh? So there's cause and effect. Now, we very often he'll say that we have our own nature, which causes us to act. This is, of course, from Gita also, based on our samskaras. And what are our samskaras? What are they based on? What we've done in the past lifetimes and this lifetime also. Now, here it is very interesting because he's saying that Paramahamsa sees that it's a God who gives us evil tendencies as well as good tendencies. Now, what does that mean? I take that to mean that us in general, because of this whole system, he's not saying, well, God chose to give this person good tendencies and that person bad tendencies. Because they'll come back and say, yes, this karma theory is there. This is also true. But this is the setup that you do bad things, you'll get bad karma, you'll get bad samskaras, you'll be born with these tendencies and everything. And this is the divine plan. So the Paramahamsa sees that it is God who gives us. So as I say, I don't take this that, I mean, if we want to be very humble and we have good qualities, we can say, yeah, it's through God's grace that I have these good qualities. We had bad qualities, are we going to say, it's not my fault, God made me do it? So we have to be careful that we understand these things. So it is God who gives us evil tendencies as well as good tendencies. Haven't you noticed that there are both sweet and bitter fruits? So what he's saying is that there'll always be good and evil in the world. There'll always be pap punya. There'll be both of these things will always be there. Why one person has one and why another person has another. This will be partly, of course, the samskaras, and partly we don't know why. Partly, of course, it's environment and culture and education, different things like that. But we see these tendencies. We can't deny these tendencies because so many people, even siblings in one family, will be so different, so different. And people within the same community that's going to the same school, same education, some will turn out to be so good, and some will be terrors. So it's very hard to say. Some trees give sweet fruit, some bitter or sour. God has made the mango tree, which yields sweet fruit, and also the hog plum, which yields sour fruit. Tantric. Yes, sir, that is true. On the hilltop, one sees extensive rose gardens reaching as far as the eye can see. Now, why he says this, I have no idea. It doesn't really fit in very well with anything. But, Master, the Paramahamsa realizes that all these, good and bad, virtue and vice, real and unreal, are only the glories of God's Maya. So, Thakur sees everything in terms of this play, the Leela. And people say, why is there evilness? This is just the nature of the play. When we say Leela and when we say Maya, these are two explanations that don't really explain anything. Maya especially doesn't explain anything. Yeah. The definition of Maya is that by which something takes place which we can't explain. It's inscrutable. We don't look for a logical reason for it. The reason is Maya. So it's just, we don't know, so we're giving a term to it, Maya. Leela is very similar, that we don't know why exactly. If somebody says, well, why is the play that way? That we don't know. But this is the way it is. If this is God's creation, then we have to assume that this is the way it is now. Does it mean God wanted to have such terrible things happen in the world? Part of this Leela is a little bit of this willpower and a little bit of ability to get ourselves in trouble and make mistakes and get entangled and do all sorts of things. So this is why Swamiji says, don't blame God. Blame yourself. Look and see what you've done to cause all this trouble. So the Paramahamsa realizes that all these, good and bad, virtue and vice, real and unreal, are only the glories of God's Maya. But these are very deep thoughts. One realizing this cannot keep an organization together or anything like that. So even Swamiji, if Swamiji at the very beginning had seen that, yes, people suffering, lack of education, uh, uh, exploitation, all of these things, no, this is part of that divine play. He wouldn't have done anything. Huh? So even Swamiji had to have a little bit of this veil of Maya. And who put that veil of Maya on Swamiji? Thakur. Huh? Of course, everyone is born with it a little bit. But when Swamiji had his Nirvikalpa Samadhi experience in Kashipur and came back and told Thakur this, I like this. I want to stay in this Samadhi state. I'll come down every once in a while like Shukadeva. Huh? And have a little bite to eat, get a little snack, and then go back and do the Samadhi. And Thakur gave him a big scolding. I thought, Naran, I thought you were greater than that. How small-minded this is. Big scolding. Here, he just finished having samadhi. He's full of bliss. Thakur letting him have it. Yeah. What a Hinabuddhi, what a small-minded person you are. Huh? I thought you'd be like a huge banyan tree. And many travelers would come, scorched by the sun, and they would take shelter under your branches. And here I hear you want to just only care about yourself. So he said, yes, this experience you've had, it'll be locked up in a box, and you have to do mother's work. So after that, then you'll get it back. So a little bit of Maya had to be there. And really, even if we say that this is the nature of the world, this is a play, we know that people suffer. Whether the cause is real or not, whether it's a dream, it doesn't matter. But if I know that I suffer, I assume everybody else suffers. And if I know that people can help me and alleviate my suffering sometimes, then it stands to reason that we can do that for other people also. So Thakur never said that, yes, this world is just a dream. Don't worry about helping other people. Nothing like that. He would say sometimes that you've spent your whole life helping other people. Now it's time to turn it over to others. Now think about God. This is the end of your life. He would do that, of course. Now, this tantric says, but the law of karma exists, doesn't it? Now, we can skip this in between stuff. And I take this as going directly from this statement. The Paramahamsa sees that it is God who gives us evil tendencies as well as good tendencies. Then we can go directly. Now we get a good logical follow-up. But the law of karma exists. So you're saying God gives us bad tendency. What about karma? Well, I thought it was because of our karma that we have these samskaras and everything. Master, that also is true. Now, is he saying that these are two different possible truths? Huh? Or they're both true? How do we understand that? Huh? We have to always remember that Thakur didn't believe in any absolute philosophical truth. He didn't believe in any one final systematic type of philosophical position to explain reality. Everything was a spiritual attitude for him. And which attitude is most helpful? If I want to be like Swamiji and say, no one to blame but myself, that'll be most helpful for me. Then somebody else will say, well, what about God? And I say, why should I trouble God with all of this and blame God for all of that? That let me stand on my own feet, and if I made mistakes, then I'll correct them myself. I'll take the help of God, of course. But so this is everyone has a different attitude. Those who say that, I'll be like the kitten. Whatever happens, I'll say, Mother, she did it for me, and this is what she wants from me, and this is what's best for me. Is it true? That's not a question for Thakur. Is it helpful? Is it a good spiritual attitude? Now, that doesn't mean that there's not truth to it. From a certain point of view, of course, 100% true. But we can look at things from all different points of view. This is the real meaning of Jotomo Totopot. It doesn't simply mean that all religions lead to the same goal. It means all spiritual attitudes are also good. All the Thakur equally like the different schools of Vedanta, dualists and qualified non-dualists and non-dualists, that they were all different attitudes. For him, this is a mutt. Jotomo Totopot. This is not the final truth. The final truth was Brahman itself in God realization. Everything else was, we could say, descriptive. We take a person, Kumar, who, what can we say about Kumar? Huh? He's a lazy fellow. He's a good fellow. That he knows how to make dosa very well. We can say all of these things. Did anything exhaust who he is? And who he is really is that infinite absolute Brahman, beyond everything. So depending on do we say that one is not true if the other is true? They're both true. All of these things are true. So for Thakur, it was just what is our point of reference? What is our attitude? Swamiji liked to, this was also one of Thakur's ideas, to say that you stand in the middle of the room and the room looks one way, you stand in the corner, it looks a different way, the same room. You look at the sun, you keep getting closer and closer, it gets bigger and bigger. Has the sun changed? The infinite absolute reality doesn't change. Our understanding is more or less accurate and helpful, and it's really a question of our spiritual attitude. So for Thakur, everything was an attitude. This is the difference between the acharyas. The acharyas said, no, this is the way it is. They would fight tooth and nail with each other. And no, the jiva can't be a part of Brahman. It has to be Brahman itself. Absolute. No questions asked. So they'll fight back and forth. For Thakur, this is why he liked that Hanuman statement. Huh? Yeah, well, if I think of myself as the body, then I'm a dualist. At that time, when I feel that I'm a jiva, then I feel that you're the whole and I'm a part. Twadang shaka. And when I feel, yes, I am that Atman, then no difference. Rama, you and I are one and the same. They're all true. Huh? Thakur quotes that so many times. That very nice verse. So, but does the law of karma exist, doesn't it, Master? That also is true. Good produces good and bad produces bad. So why do we blame God for giving samskaras? Huh? When I did bad things, I got bad samskaras. Huh? Why do we blame God? We don't blame God. But this is the setup. This is the way this Leela works. And everything gets traced back to that one reality, which we call Brahman, or personal God, if we like. Don't you get the hot taste if you eat chilies? But these are all God's Leela, his play. So the play, it's not random. It's not just because it's a play, it doesn't mean there aren't laws at work. And the main law at work on the spiritual levels is law of karma. Tantric. Then what is the way for us? We shall have to reap the result of our past karma, shall we not? Now, Thakur gives us a new understanding of this law of karma. He says if we have enough devotion, it can bend a little bit. It's not so strict. The Mimamsakas, those who follow very strictly some of these doctrines with regard to karma and the punya and ritual and all of these things, they'll say no. This is something very absolute. That this prarabdha karma has to be exhausted. You can't do anything about it. You can be a God-realized soul, and still the body will last as long as you have that karma left. Thakur says that through devotion and through knowledge and all of these things, that it can be softened, it can be lessened. So Thakur says that may be so. The interesting reply. He's not going to contradict him. Sometimes he'll say that, now I understand you hold the view of the orthodox view of the karma yogi, something like that. But here he says that may be so. But it is different with the devotees of God. So the pinprick instead of the sword. We know so many examples that we get. Holy Mother also says, listen to a song. Oh mind, you do not know how to farm. A very beautiful Ram Prasad song that he wrote so many songs with the same tune. This Prasadi and many other songwriters use the same tune also. It's become kind of a universal tune, a very pretty song. Krishikaj Januna. Oh, my man, you do not know how to farm. Fallow lies the field of your life. If you had only worked it well, how rich a harvest you might reap. So putting the blame on us, not blaming God here, putting the blame on us. Hedge it about with Kali's name, if you would keep your harvest safe. This is the stoutest hedge of all, for death himself cannot come near it. So we become devotees, and then we get some protection from all of this. Sooner or later will dawn the day when you must forfeit your precious field. Gather, O mind, what fruit you may. Sow for your seed the holy name. So forfeit that precious field means die. We will leave this life one day, and we won't take anything with us. Sow for your seed the holy name of God that your Guru has given to you, faithfully watering it with love. And if you should find the task too hard, call upon Ram Prasad for help. Yeah, he's very interesting that he's always talking to his mind and telling mind, if you can't do it, then call Ram Prasad, he'll help you. Very interesting. How he's disidentifying himself with the mind. That the mind is the one that doesn't know how to do anything. The mind doesn't know how to farm the field of life and everything. But I'll help you, he says. This is Ram Prasad. Beautiful attitude. He's the one who laid the ground for Thakur Shontan Bhav. This is the mood of the child worshiping God as the Divine Mother. And Thakur always gave him credit. And he used to pray that, Mother, why won't you reveal yourself to me? You revealed yourself to Ram Prasad. And why not to me? So he was kind of like John the Baptist for Christ, that he was secondary, and that certainly we don't compare him to Christ, but he had to be there to start the tradition a little bit. Or Advaita, we can say, with Chaitanya Deva, Advaita Acharya. He was really the founder of that little group of the Vaishnava devotees and everything. But then as soon as Chaitanya Deva came along, then it became his. He sang again, I have securely blocked the way by which the king of death will come. Henceforward, all my doubts and fears are set at naught forever. Shiva himself is standing guard at the 9 doorways of my house. This means the body with its 9 openings, eyes, ears, nose, mouth, etc., which has 1 pillar, that means Brahman, for support, and 3 ropes, the 3 gunas, to secure it. The Lord has made his dwelling place the 1,000-petaled lotus flower within the head, and comforts me with never-ceasing care. This is the Shakta Shiva view, that Shiva resides in the Sahasrara, the 1,000-petaled lotus at the top of the head, and the Divine Mother as the Shakti. She can go all the way back and forth, but she'll have to start her journey from the Muladhara, from the lowest chakra, and they look upon this God realization as the union of Shiva and Shakti. Another way of saying that the divine power will have to go all the way up through all the different centers, and will have to reach the head, which is the abode of Shiva. See, none of these things contradict any of the others, even Advaita Vedanta or anything. They're just beautiful, with so many options, different ways of understanding this spiritual journey. This is also kind of climbing to the roof. Each step is one of the chakras. The master continued, anyone who dies in Benares, whether a Brahmin or a prostitute, will become Shiva. Okay, now another big question. We also say that unless you have no desires whatsoever, you'll be born again. Huh? And how many rascals die in Benares? Huh? Did they all attain liberation? We have some nice stories. I'll tell two of them. One was Swami Shuddhanandaji. Swami Shuddhanandaji, he was Swamiji's disciple, first president of the order, who was not a direct disciple. Uh, so after Swami Vijnanandaji, he became president. He was taking a class with the brahmacharis, and they were talking about this Benares and everything. One of them asked, "Is it really true that anybody who dies in Benares will get liberation?" And he said, "Yes, we read about this in the scriptures." And Thakur also said it. And the brahmachari said, "No, I want to know, do you believe that it's true?" So he hemmed and hawed a little bit, and then finally said, "Look, you think if I really believed that it was true that I wouldn't be there right now instead of being here?" So it's not that we have to take this in a very absolute sense. The second story, that one of the old sadhus had moved and was living in Benares and waiting to die there. And as a young monk, he said to him, but Thakur says, unless you're free from desires, you won't get liberation. And the monk said, "You rascal, here, I've moved all the way here just with this thought that I'll get liberation. You're creating this doubt in my mind." And then he laughed and he said, "No, we believe that both are true, that dying here, the atmosphere is so great at the very moment all desires will leave us." And then Thakur had a vision, of course, we know that Shiva's on one side giving this mantra, Taraka mantra, this the salvation mantra, and Holy Mother is untying all of the chains on the Divine Mother on the other side, and that's how one gets liberation. But for us, any place is Benares if we think of God at the end. We don't have to worry about. See, Thakur, he was so liberal and farsighted in his thinking. Even this idea of bathing the Ganges, all sins are gone. He said, "Yes, it's true, but you know what they do? They're waiting on the limbs of the trees for you to get out of the Ganges. They'll jump right back on your shoulders." Yeah. So he was really, in many ways, less orthodox than even modern day people. Huh? Even with the scriptures, how we fight with every verse that we read in the scriptures to show how brilliant it is and everything. And he says, "No, even that, there may be a little bit of sand mixed in with the sugar. Don't worry about it. Just take the sugar and leave the rest behind." So the master continued, "Anyone who dies in Benares, whether a Brahmin or a prostitute, will become Shiva." Now, this brings in another element to this, of course, that we think that we know who's good and who's bad just by seeing the external things. That this question of what happens to us, what our real karma is, and everything, we can't really tell just by seeing the outside. When a man sheds tears at the name of Hari, Kali, or Rama, then he has no further need of the Sandhya. This means, and other rites, is Sandhya is something that Thakur, very orthodox people will do this 3 times a day, even, and repeating Gayatri Mantra. Some will even go so far as they'll wade into the Ganga, chest deep in water, looking at the sun and doing Gayatri. Thakur said these are okay in the beginning, but we reach a state where we don't have to do all of these things. So he said Sandhya merges into Gayatri, Gayatri merges into Om. So then it was just repeating Om is enough. I've seen in Kolkata the way this Sandhya is observed sometimes. You go to a restaurant or something, and as soon as they turn the light on, which means that it just got dark enough to turn the light on, because everyone they're done. So it can be just an empty ritual also. But in our order, very often these brahmacharis who join, if they had initiation into Gayatri Mantra, they'll ask, should we continue to do it? Now we've joined. And very often that they're told, yes, continue. That this is your family tradition and everything. Continue up until the time of sannyasa, then you'll give it up. You don't have to. And of course, when we take brahmacharya vows, we get the Gayatri mantra. I also had the sacred thread. Sacred thread and this tiki, and repeated Gayatri mantra for 4 years, and then we give it up. Again, the master sang, as is a man's meditation, so is his feeling of love. As is a man's feeling of love, so is his gain. Now, this is that line that Thakur repeats over and over and over again, and I think it really sums up what we've been talking about this whole time. Jaman bhav temni labh. And it says, as is a man's feeling of love. This bhav, it means feeling of love. It can also mean spiritual attitude. Whatever attitude we have, and not just the attitude, I mean, it has to be something that we feel deeply. So there's a feeling of love, but it'll be even like a dualistic thing. If my attitude is, then I want to think of God as mother, that'll be bhav. And what I gain from it will be based on the extent to which I cling to that. And I base my life on that, not the extent to which it's objectively true or false. That's why if people say, "Oh, you're telling me that whatever happens to you is for the best because Mother wants it to happen, and some tragedy just happened," do you really think that Mother, the Divine Mother of the universe, arranged for this tragedy to happen because it's good for you? Huh? So Devil will say, "Don't bother me with all of this stuff. I have my spiritual attitude, and it gets me through life very nicely and very peacefully with a great deal of contentment. And don't disturb me with all of these types of logical questions and things like that." So, Jaman bhav temni labh, as is our attitude and feeling of love, so is our gain. And faith is the root of all. If in the nectar lake of Mother Kali's feet my mind remains immersed, of little use or worship, oblation, or sacrifice. This is that journey we take from ritual to the Vaidhi Bhakti to Anuraga that Thakur talks about so often. And he is always trying to get the devotees to not just lessen their worldly duties, but also lessen their dependence on ritual, and really to feel everything deeply within the heart to get to the state of Anuraga, his divine love. He sang another song. Why should I go to Ganga or Gaya, to Kashi Kanchi or Prabhas, so long as I can breathe my last with Kali's name upon my lips? In the gospel, the way M wrote it, that very often he'll just give the first few lines of a song if he's given the whole song before. So sometimes we don't get the full song. There will be other places we'll get the whole thing. It's a very beautiful song. Then he said, when a man merges himself in God, he can no longer retain wicked or sinful tendencies. Now it goes back to that original question. Huh? Does the Paramahamsa, does he see, how was it? Does he see, is that how it was? Is he aware of virtue and vice? So the secondary meaning of can he do anything that will fall under the category of vice? So this is what Thakur was saying. Yeah, maybe theoretically, if he did something that because he doesn't feel he's the agent of action, no karma will come. But in practical sense, it's impossible. When a man merges himself in God, he can no longer retain wicked or sinful tendencies. Tantric, you have said rightly that he keeps only the knowledge ego. Now, this tantric must have come to Sri Ramakrishna before, because this is a very particular teaching of Sri Ramakrishna, that in the state of vijnana, after God realization coming down, one lives in the world with this ego of knowledge or this ego of devotion. And the ego of knowledge, he always points to Shankaracharya. The ego of devotion can take many, many different forms. child of God, servant of God, any of the attitudes, spiritual attitudes that we have, even the Vatsalya Bhava, looking upon God as a child, these will all be this devotee ego. So Thakur says he keeps only the knowledge ego or devotee ego, the servant ego, and the good ego. And what Thakur really means is this ripe ego. So we have this paka ami, kancha ami and paka ami. This ego that it can't do anything harmful to anyone, and it doesn't have any of that sense of attachment, because Thakur's understanding of this ego is very much in line with modern psychology. It's not the ahankara of the Sankhya, which we get the impression that it's some very fixed kind of thing. That we have our manas and buddhi, ahankara, and chitta, and this ahankara. It's an actual structure within the mind. There's this real sense of I and everything. For Thakur, it's a floating, changing thing. So, and growing and ripening. He really sees it in terms of starting on green and ripening, so that it's really just what do we mean when we think of ourselves? That's our ego. The existentialist philosophers, they say that the ego is just a thought, it's just an idea. There's no substance to it. That's what Thakur said. And Vedanta says, you search for this ego, he said, you won't find it. Search for this I, you'll find God. You'll find Tini. Look for Ami, you'll find Tini. Look for this ego within, and you won't find it. The second we stop looking for it, it comes back. A very odd thing. Very odd thing. We look for it, and it runs away. You know that story of Ramana Maharshi, that he says that there's the ego, it's like the uninvited guest at a wedding. That somebody shows up and he's eating too much and drinking too much and stuffing his face with food and putting things in his pocket. And one side of the family thinks, well, he must have been invited by the other side. They think he must have been invited by that side. And they look at each other and they say, nope. And they say, nope. And then they start walking to him and he realizes he's been caught and he runs out the door. So this is the ego, that it's completely out of control. It'll do whatever it wants to do when we're not watching and paying attention. As soon as it's caught and everything, then it leaves. But then it comes back. That's the problem. Yeah. So Thakur says, you may reason 1,000 times. He said literally 1,000 times. And the ego is unreal, that there's no substance to it. But then very next day it comes back. Tantric. Today you have destroyed many of our doubts. Master, all doubts disappear when one realizes the self. Yeah, we have two different types of doubts. We know this, that when we talk about having conviction, Vishwas, because Thakur will talk about that again, Vishwas, this conviction, that it doesn't mean that we've had this God realization and we're certain about everything. It means we know if we follow these teachings that we'll get and have that ultimate experience. We have that type of faith. It doesn't mean that if somebody says, "Oh, then you really know this world is unreal, God alone is real." No, I don't know that, but I have faith and confidence that this is the final truth, and that if I practice, that I'll have that experience. The other type of doubt, that can it really be true what we read in the scriptures? That leaves us when we have this direct experience. So the two different levels of this doubt, and one is this conviction, and the other is anubhuti. Difference between Vishwas and anubhuti. When we have the direct experience, then all doubts leave. When we have Vishwas, then we have confidence and faith in the teachings. All doubts disappear when one realizes the self. Assume the tamasic aspect of bhakti. This is what I said in the beginning. He likes this tamas. Say with force, What? I have uttered the names of Rama and Kali. How can I be in bondage anymore? How can I be affected by the law of karma? See, he really, he says, even this law of karma, forget about it. And don't think, oh, I'm bound. I did so many things, horrible things in the past. What will happen to me? In a second, we can burn up all of that karma if we can get some devotion. The master sang, if only I can pass away repeating Durga's name. How canst thou then, O blessed one, withhold from me deliverance? Wretched though I may be, I may have stolen the drink of wine, or killed a child unborn, or slain a woman or a cow, or even caused a Brahmin's death. But though it all be true, nothing of this can make me feel the least uneasiness. Of course, this is hyperbole. Don't do any of these things. For through the power of thy sweet name, my wretched soul may still aspire even to Brahmanhood. The master continued, faith, faith, faith. Huh? Vishwas, huh? Yeah. This Vishwas, it really uh, is one of the final things that we have. I've mentioned many times this statement of Swami Swahanandaji. He said that this conviction is itself a kind of realization. When we feel so strongly that this is true, it has that same transforming effect to a certain extent. Once a guru said to his pupil, Rama alone has become everything. When a dog began to eat the pupil's bread, he said to it, O Rama, wait a little, I shall butter your bread. Such was the faith in the words of his guru. Worthless people do not have any faith, they always doubt. Yeah, in Gita we have that wonderful line that they're gone. Some say Atma Vanashyati, that people, these skeptical people, always doubting and questioning everything, that there's no hope for them. Worthless people do not have any faith; they always doubt. But doubts do not disappear completely till one realizes the self. In genuine love of God, there is no desire. Only through such love does one speedily realize God. This ahetuki bhakti, shuddha bhakti, that there's no shopkeeping, there's no that I'll do this worship, you give me all these things and everything. It's got to be this pure devotion. It has to be just praying for love of God itself. Even God realization, there'll be devotees who won't even pray for that. Yes, grant me the boon of devotion. Love itself will be the highest prayer. Thakur says, I prayed only for Shuddha Bhakti, only for pure love. I said, even your dharma, all of this, your good and evil, virtue and vice, take everything. I only care for this pure love. Only through such love does one speedily realize God. Attainment of supernatural powers and so on, these are desires. Krishna once said to Arjuna, friend, you can realize God if you acquire, you cannot realize God if you acquire even one of the 8 supernatural powers. They will only add a little to your power. Tantric, sir, why don't the rituals of Tantra bear fruit nowadays? Master, it is because people cannot practice them with absolute correctness and devotion. In conclusion, the Master said, love of God is the one essential thing. A true lover of God has nothing to fear, nothing to worry about. He is aware that the Divine Mother knows everything. The cat handles the mouse one way, but its own kitten a very different way. We wonder why Kali has 4 arms, and why the sword and all of that. That's not for us. That's for the demons. That's to protect us. Okay, that's the end of that day. We begin next time, chapter 12, the festival at Banihati. Om Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanukam Bhatatavikraham Yeshavataram Parameshamidya Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namama. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto